Hello and welcome to Pockenrop. In today's video I am taking liberties to rank the studio albums of Elvis Costello. I have been trailing this for a couple of weeks. There is a brand new Elvis Costello and the Imposters album out, which along the way I am going to formally review. Spoiler, I like the album, but the question is, how much do I like it? And you'll find that out over the course of this video. Before we take the plunge, a couple of qualifiers. I'm not including For the Stars, neither am I including Il Sogno. I'd just like to remind you to hit the thumbs up to like the video, click the subscribe and the bell to receive notifications of future content. And let's go in. I'm ranking 29 records, and at number 29, Wise Up Ghost from 2012. This is a collaboration between Elvis Costello and The Roots, and there's a lot of reimagining of Elvis Costello songs in styles that I cannot stand. Words fail me about how much I disliked this album when I heard it, and a lot of that is predicated on just the recycling of material. Now, one of my favourite songs from the Beard years of Elvis Costello is Invasion Hit Parade. There's a track on this album that takes the entire lyric and puts something else behind it. Now, I've got no problem with that. Rewrite a song with a new tune. That's a great idea. It's been happening for centuries. But this isn't a tune. It's a horrible piece. I can't stand it. Later on, they take a song that I have never, ever cared for, which is Pills and Soap, and they reinterpret that. And I dislike it even more. This is an album I will not be listening to again because my experience with it was so negative. Rising a little to number 28 is the covers album, Kojak Variety, that came out in '95 and was recorded around about the time of Mighty Like a Rose. There's nothing wrong with the songs. Arguably, there's nothing really wrong with the performance, although I do think Costello's voice is extremely odd on this album. But generally, all of those covers were done better in the original versions. At number 27, marginally better, is the album North from 2003. This is an unusual album. This is very autobiographical. It was around the breakup of his marriage to Kate O'Riordan, but it's so relentlessly downbeat for the first half of the album, which I guess, given the fact that it's autobiographical and tells a story, kind of makes sense. But it's not an enjoyable listen. It never has been. It was better than I remembered it when I listened to it this week. And the three songs that perhaps are the heart of the album and sit right in the middle of it, which are When It Sings, Still, and Let Me Tell You About Her, are great and would grace any Costello album. Number 27, North. So heading north from that is the album I placed at number 26, which is The Delivery Man from 2004. Now, this is an album that I owned when it came out. I listened, it never grabbed me. I got rid of, I bought again. I listened again, it still didn't grab me. And I've got rid of, and I've listened to again on download, and it still fails utterly for me. There's very little to hook into, with one exception, and that is the song There's a Story in Your Voice. That is a terrific song. It is just such a shame that it is Hold Below the Waterline by Lucinda Williams vocals that I really, really don't like. That's a personal taste thing. The rest of it's perfectly fine, but doesn't rise above that. At number 25, I've put an album that is admired by a lot of people, but not by me, and also not by a lot of Elvis Costello fans. It's Painted from Memory, his collaboration with Burt Bacharach. There is half a good album here. The songs are well constructed, but they're not engaging. And that includes the single off it, Toledo, which is possibly the best thing on the record. I think the song God Give Me Strength, which was from the film Grace of My Heart, is massively overrated. I'd be happy not to hear it again. There is better stuff by Costello on the Grace of My Heart soundtrack, and we will come to that shortly. Number 24 is an album that was very maligned when it was released. It is Almost Blue. his covers record of country songs, and it's his better covers record. It outstrips Kojak Variety comfortably. Good Year for the Roses is absolutely terrific. I'm Your Toy and Sweet Dreams are both really, really fine. And the other tracks, there's nothing wrong with them. It's just, again, it's a covers album. And number 23 is When I Was Cruel from 2001. Yeah, it's a loud album, but it's only half a good album. And I still own this because that half a good album is, for me, amongst his best work. So, 45 that opens the album, it was a good single. Tear Off Your Own Head, I think, is fantastic. Episode of Blonde is the standout track on the whole album. Daddy Can I Turn This, I think, is superb. My Little Blue Window and Radio Silence are both excellent. So that's 7 tracks that are really good. If you then added in Tart, Spooky Girlfriend and Soul for Hire, I think you'd have a potential top 10 album of great material. But the other 5 tracks on this album are awful, and they indicate his future direction towards Wise Up Ghost and the horrors contained within. And at number 22, I have placed the album Look Now from 2018. This is an album that is fine. There's nothing bad on here. The 3 Bacharach collaborations feel like they come from Painted from Memory, but this contains the really good track that he wrote for Grace of My Heart, which is Unwanted Number. I've loved this ever since I heard the original version by For Real that was on the Grace of My Heart soundtrack. It's a perfect pastiche of Carole King's early songwriting. And speaking of Carole King, whom the film was kind of based on her life, she contributes on this album. She co-wrote Burnt Sugar Is So Bitter, which is a good track. The only other thing I really want to mention is the track Stripping Paper. That has a real Imperial Bedroom feel for me. At number 21, I have placed an album I've never owned. It is National Ransom from 2010. This I've heard a few times. It never stood out, but listening to it this week, in terms of my research for this video, it's way, way better than I remember it. There is nothing bad on National Ransom. The problem is there is nothing phenomenal either on National Ransom. At number 22, Hey Clockface from 2020. So this album is perfectly fine. I have listened to it a few times. I haven't listened to it a lot. Same reasons as before. There's nothing that really leaps out. The only track I could probably hum is The Last Confession of Vivian Whip. At number 19, I have placed Punch the Clock. Now, I know a lot of people really like this album, but for me, it is workmanlike and not in a good way. I've already mentioned I do not like Pills and Soap. Shipbuilding, I admire, but I don't necessarily like, if that makes sense to people. I think it's a very well constructed song, but I don't exactly enjoy it. There is much to enjoy on this album. Let Them All Talk is great fun fluff. Every Day I Write the Book is one of his best ever singles, in my opinion. And I really like tracks like Charm School and King of Thieves and The World and His Wife, but none of them really soar to the kind of heights that are present on many other Costello albums. At number 18, I have placed Secret, Profane and Sugarcane from 2009. Now, I like bluegrass. I love Alison Krauss. And if you know what, if Costello is to do a collaboration with Alison Krauss in exactly the same way as Robert Plant did, I would buy that. And I would probably love it because her voice is just sublime. But this is his bluegrass album. And the 2 best songs on here are what actually drag it down the list. And they are Complicated Shadows, which he had already released, and Hidden Shame, which he had already released the demo of, both of which are superior. It's a good album to listen to, but it doesn't really stick in the memory that much. Pitchfork describes this as being the latest in his series of gestural albums, and whilst that may be harsh criticism, there's a certain validity in that. At number 17 is the album immediately prior to this, which is Momofuku. This had completely failed for me when I first heard it. I had it on download. It just hasn't yet burrowed into my brain in the same way that other Costello stuff has. I think that could change. Mr. Feathers is a terrific song. The second half of Momofuku is outstandingly good. My Three Sons really stood out for me. There was nothing actually bad on this album. And there were a few highlights. I think revisiting this will see it climb higher. At number 16, I placed the Juliet Letters, which he recorded with the Brodsky Quartet. Now, yes, there's a certain amount of pretension around this album, and I don't think that's entirely fair, because the songwriting in here, I think, is really, really good. I love Swine. I love Till I Almost Had a Weakness. I love This Offer is Unrepeatable, Jackson's Monken Road, The Birds Will Still Be Singing. So many highlights that the very deep troughs that are on this record don't detract from it. The Juliet Letters got a lot of flack when it came out from Costello fans, and I don't think it was warranted. It's a fine album. Moving into the next batch of 5, where I would say that all of these albums are flawed, but still great. At number 15, the final record with the Attractions is All This Useless Beauty. This is where the original version of Complicated Shadows is to be found. Other End of the Telescope, co-write with Amy Mann. All This Useless Beauty, which is an absolutely stunning song. The troughs that are in here are things like Why Can't a Man Stand Alone? I just don't think him crooning really works. I've never particularly liked It's Time. And I Want to Vanish, which sees the return of the Brodsky Quartet, feels a little bit superfluous. Perhaps if the album had ended with what I think is the best thing on it, which is You Bowed Down, then maybe a 10-track album would have been exactly right. And number 14 is an album that is so often cited as his most underrated that it's actually potentially overrated. It's Trust. 1981, and contains some really good performances by the Attractions, some really good songwriting by Elvis. But the trough on this album is the first Elvis Costello song that I remember actively loathing, and it's Luxembourg. Take that off and Trust leaps up several spaces, because this has got Fish and Chip Paper. This has got Clubland, Watch Your Step, You'll Never Be a Man, and From a Whisper to a Scream. There's great stuff on Trust, but the trough drags it down so badly. And number 13 is one of the biggest surprises I had over this last week. It's the collaboration with Alan Toussaint, The River in Reverse. Now, I very nearly didn't listen to this because so much of this is written purely by Alan Toussaint. But what a great album. This is New Orleans music done incredibly well. The piano playing is terrific. Costello's singing is great. The trough on the album, and there is one, is the song that Costello wrote purely by himself, and it's The River in Reverse. If you took that off this record, this would be nearly perfect in terms of a collaboration. It's a great record, and I'm actively keeping an eye out for The River in Reverse, and it's not easy to find in record shops now. I feel like I missed out on this 2006 record. River in Reverse, you were the biggest casualty of the Painted from Memory to Delivery Man disappointment that I endured through those 5 records, because I wish I'd found you sooner. And number 12, Brutal Youth. This contains one of my all-time favourite Costello tracks in London's Brilliant Parade. There's terrific songs on here. There's the reunion with the Attractions, which is just joyful. 13 Steps Lead Down, You Tripped at Every Step, Still Too Soon to Know, Favourite Hour, All the Rage. It has its troughs, and that's what pulls it back down again, one of which is Clown Strike. I hate Clown Strike. And I really, really, really dislike 20% Amnesia. And at number 11, I have placed an album that I don't think many people would put as high as I've done. This was very nearly top 10. Goodbye, Cruel World. Costello, when this was re-released in 1995, which was when I first encountered it, in its remastered form and with a load of bonus tracks, said, "Congratulations, you just purchased our worst album." I disagree. And he now kind of views it as being the worst album he could have made of a bunch of decent songs. And there are many decent songs on this. The Only Flame in Town, Home Truth, Room Without a Number, Inch by Inch, and Worthless Thing are all fab. Joe Porterhouse, which is amongst one of my favourite Elvis Costello and the Attractions tracks. The Great Unknown is really good. Deportees Club is wrong-headed because Deportee is fantastic. And Peace in Our Time is perfectly fine. The album's better than you may remember it being. We now reach my top 10 Costello album. And at number 10, Blood and Chocolate. It's taken me years to learn to like this album. I Want You is phenomenal. As is Blue Chair and Battered Old Bird. Crimes of Paris, I Hope You're Happy Now. Next Time Round. The album has seriously grown on me over the decades, and it can be hard work to listen to, but it rewards repeated listenings. At number 9 is the first Costello album that I even remember, Spike. So I borrowed this from the local record library in 1989, the year it came out. I had a particular interest in it, which was I'm a Paul McCartney fan. And on here are collaborations with McCartney, like Veronica, up there with my all-time favourite Costello songs. McCartney plays bass on This Town. He co-wrote Pads, Paws and Claws, which is one of the weaker moments of the record. There were so many other really, really good songs on Spike. It's a mess, it's a mishmash, but it's got some serious peaks on here that drag those difficult bits up a little bit. And it just sneaks into number 9. It's at number 9 because I probably have no objectivity about the fact that McCartney appears on it and Veronica's on it. So, number 9, Spike. And at number 8, I have placed The Boy Named If. We reach it at last. This is part of the reason for the video existing. My review of The Boy Named If. So first off, I said right up front I liked it, but just how much did I like it? Well, it's a top 10er. I've listened to this album 3 times, I think, since it came out. And I genuinely don't think there's a weak track on here. And there are many, many highlights. I think Paint the Red Rose Blue is one of his most affecting ballads. I think it's absolutely fantastic. The Difference burrowed into my brain and won't get out of it. The playing on here is the first time that I'm aware that I really enjoyed the Imposters as his backing band and being properly aware of Davey Farragher's bass and it feeling like Bruce Thomas's bass playing. I can't get over how surprised I have been by The Boy Named If. Like I said, I had not really been bothered for 20 years, and then this comes along. And I hadn't really been bothered by Hey Clockface or Look Now that much. But for this, it's like an old friend coming round again that you haven't seen for 20 years. It has the energy and buzz of this year's model. And I don't think it's much of a surprise that this record has come out after he's been curating the Spanish model project, where this year's model has been recorded as Spanish versions by other artists. So this year's model is clearly on his mind when he's been recording The Boy Named If. And it feels like it. There are allusions to Imperial Bedroom. I hear bits of Blood and Chocolate in here. Costello has not sounded this vibrant and vital and as in tune with his band since probably King of America, if not Blood and Chocolate. And I'm hopeful that we'll see a dotage phase of Costello brilliance like we've had from McCartney. Boy Named If, fantastic album, and I am itching to get a physical copy. Really, really fine. Number 8, and it blew me away. I am excited for Costello again because of The Boy Named If. And number 7 is Armed Forces, currently sitting in the controversial category. So that doesn't mean anything to you. It's because Costello himself has said, please don't play Oliver's Army on the radio anymore. I am uncomfortable with the lyric that involves the N-word. He's also said, I'm never going to play it live again. But this is an album of great pop songs. Accidents Will Happen kicks it off, and I think it's one of the best all-time album openers ever. Senior Service, the aforementioned Oliver's Army, Big Boys, Green Shirt, Party Girl. I forgot to mention, in my review of The Boy Named If, I Can't Give You Anything But Love, it feels like a direct quotation from Party Girl off this record. He's so going back into his history for The Boy Named If and pulling out the best. Get it. It's a great album. Armed Forces is a fine pop album. His third record and my number 7. Number 6, Get Happy. So this came in 1980. It's the follow-up to Armed Forces. It's the better record, mainly because it doesn't stand still long enough for you to get bored with anything. Several tracks are below 2 minutes. There are 20 of them. And yet it still feels like a much tighter and focused album and punchier album than longer albums with 15 tracks that come on later in his career. Get Happy it's just a joyful, fun album. Temptation and Love for Tender, King Horse, Secondary Modern, New Amsterdam. Oh man, there's so much good stuff on this record. Side 1 is comfortably better than side 2, in my opinion. But as I saw a review around 1994 when this was reissued, Costello doesn't put a foot wrong, really, on Get Happy. At number 5, his debut, My Aim Is True. This was my first proper Costello album. Yes, I'd heard Spike, but this was the first Costello album that I actually owned. So it kicks off with Welcome to the Working Week. What a way to open up a career as well as an album, because being a musician was to become his working week. Miracle Man, Blame It on Kane, Less Than Zero, Allison. Gosh, what an amazingly good song. The Angels Want to Wear My Red Shoes and Waiting for the End of the World and I'm Not Angry. It's a terrific debut. It's one of the best debut albums of all time. And number 4 is my controversial pick of the week, Mighty Like a Rose. I must admit, when I first heard it, I thought, what the is this? The only thing I was even remotely interested in was Georgie and Her Rival, which I thought was fantastic, and So Like Candy, because it was a co-write with Paul McCartney. Despite the fact that I listened to it, disliked it and dismissed it, when it came round for being reissued, I took the plunge again and discovered what I'd been missing. The Other Side of Summer and Sweet Pear and the triptych in the middle of the record that tells the story of Eastern Europe. So that's Invasion Hit Parade, the one that's been bastardized on Wise Up Ghost. Harpy's Bazaar, which I think is the best song on here. And then After the Fall. All Grown Up, which I used to like Tasman Archer's version of. Mighty Like a Rose, I think, is a misunderstood classic and is ripe for a proper reinterpretation. And number 3, it is the peerless This Year's Model. Took me a long time to really love this album as well, but this is in my top albums of the 1970s. Again, this is just a perfect length of an album. It's perfect level of attitude. It is a pop boiler of emotion. The new band, The Attractions, accompany him so much better than the accompaniment on My Aim Is True. There is no bad song on This Year's Model. And it's a great, great album. Near perfect. This Year's Model at number 3. At number 2 is another album that I would describe as just shy of being perfect. It's The King of America. So recorded in 1985 and released in 86. comes off the back of what was a very depressing period in his life, but there's so many of his most affecting personal ballads on here. So stuff like I'll Wear It Proudly and Jack of All Parades, the answer song to I'll Wear It Proudly. Sleep of the Just, which is beautiful. There's also co-write with Kate O'Riordan, which is Our Little Angel. And I forgot to mention Little Palaces, where he plays the mandolin. It's by far the best country-ish album he did. King of America, my number 2. And at number 1 is the only album that I genuinely think is utterly perfect. Imperial Bedroom from 1982. At one time in my life, this was my favourite album of all time until Abbey Road retook its first place. Imperial Bedroom is sublime. The songwriting is magnificent. The performances from the attractions are brilliant. The invention that Costello wanted to take out onto this album is writ large. It's why he didn't have Nick Lowe produce it, because he thought he would get Nick Lowe's patience tried by what he wanted to do. And in Every Home features an orchestra on, I think, the first time on an Elvis Costello studio album. And it's conducted by Steve Naive. It's a absolutely perfect album, from Beyond Belief all the way through to Town Crier, taking in The Long Honeymoon, taking in And in Every Home, and Pigeon English, and Human Hands, and Kid About It, and Boy with a Problem, and the heart of the album, Man Out of Time. But Imperial Bedroom, for me, the one absolutely perfect album in his canon, and it is a masterpiece. My number 1, Imperial Bedroom. So that concludes this lengthy video where I have ranked 29 Elvis Costello studio albums and reviewed The Boy Named If. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Give me your ranking, or maybe, if you don't have time, maybe just your top 5 or 10 Costello albums, the ones you couldn't live without. I'll be back in a week with a new video. I don't know what it's going to be yet. Please remember to like, subscribe, and hit the bell. And until then, thanks for watching.